Alright, Sundance 2024 is in the books, and I had a great time. Was able to catch some amazing films and talk to some brilliant filmmakers. Despite my best efforts, I was not able to watch all 90 feature films that played at the festival, so obviously there is a chance that I have missed a couple that could have made their way onto this list. I will say I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, and these are actually films that I was unable to make for a variety of schedule-related reasons, but based on the folks that I've talked to, they are certainly ones to keep an eye out for. The first honorable mention is I Saw the TV Glow from Jane Schoenbrunn. They put out their first feature film. We're all going to the World's Fair a few years ago to critical acclaim. Audience score, not so much. They are certainly at the top of the indie horror game, which may not have complete appeal to all audiences, but they have already captured the respect of cinephiles around the world. Next on the honorable mention list is a documentary film, Will and Harper, from Josh Greenbaum. Essentially, this film follows Will Ferrell and his transgender friend, Harper Steele, as they go on a road trip. Harper, having come out as a transgender woman in 2021, this film explores their friendship and kind of Will Ferrell's acceptance of his longtime friend and recognizing her as a woman. Third on the honorable mention list is My Old Ass from Megan Park, starring Aubrey Plaza alongside Maisie Stella and also featuring Maddie Ziegler. Essentially, this film is not an entirely novel concept. We have Stella's character meeting an older version of herself, played by Aubrey Plaza, and she learns more about who she is, about the world around her. The one, perhaps, interesting twist that we haven't quite seen in this kind of film is this encounter with an older self is fueled by psilocybin mushrooms. And the final honorable mention on this list before we get to the top 10 is a film called Daughters, a documentary film that was actually just yesterday purchased from Netflix, so it will be coming out to that streaming platform. This documentary follows several daughters, as the name implies, who are kind of building, forging, trying to keep relationships alive with their fathers who are incarcerated. Alright, starting the top 10 countdown, number 10 is Love Lies Bleeding. This film, directed by Rose Glass, is almost destined to be a cult classic, although being an A24 film, maybe it will be too big to be given that status. It's directed by Rose Glass, who put out Saint Maud, another A24 film, one of my favorites from a few years ago. Love Lies Bleeding is an adventure. It, I will say, maybe lacks subtlety, which, of course, is the intention here. It follows a tumultuous love relationship between Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien. Kristen Stewart playing an employee at a gym, and Katie O'Brien playing a bodybuilder. They go on, as I had mentioned, an adventure, resulting in a lot of killing, some tremendous body horror. There was one moment in particular that elicited a gasp from the entire audience, sold-out theater, and even a smattering of applause. This film will force you to kind of suspend your disbelief. There are elements of the surreal and the supernatural that if you struggle to buy into, you might struggle with the film overall. but it is certainly a fun one. It presents kind of a queer relationship front and center in a way that maybe we haven't seen in such a large project, but has certainly been seen in kind of smaller indie horror throughout the years. Number 9 is Presence. This film is directed by legendary director Steven Soderbergh and legendary Sundance director as well, given that his first film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, premiered at the festival decades ago and essentially launched his career to the point that it is now. I absolutely loved this film at times, mostly for its unique premise and beautiful cinematography. Essentially, this film is shot from the perspective of the quote-unquote presence that is living in a house. It's, again, kind of your classic haunted house ghost story, but this shift in perspective is quite fascinating, and apparently Soderbergh himself was the primary camera operator moving through the house, essentially being the eyes of this presence. Unfortunately for me, some of the script fell flat, didn't hit every single beat for me. The dialogue was not brilliant, and the performances outside of Chris Sullivan I didn't find myself being in love with, but for the premise and the beauty of the camera here, it is more than worth a watch. Number 8 is Freaky Tales. This film is directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who also have their roots in Sundance, submitting a short film, ultimately leading to some funding and other projects. Fast forward, and they were able to create Captain Marvel, a billion-dollar film. Freaky Tales is a film made by filmmakers who already have their billion-dollar project in hand. You can tell that this was a passion project and they had a ton of fun with it. It is essentially an ode to Oakland, and it's divided into 3 distinct parts. The first part follows some young punks as they encounter a group of Nazi skinheads. The second part focuses on a rap battle and 2 up-and-coming female rappers. The third part centers on Pedro Pascal as he retires from his dangerous career. All 3 parts are essentially tied together through the story of Sleepy Floyd, the Warriors basketball legend. As is often the case when you split a film into 3 parts, I felt like I didn't get enough time with some of the characters. Some of their stories were a bit underdeveloped, but again, that's the risk that you run. At the end of the day, this is a fun one. Is it earth-shattering or groundbreaking? Probably not, but the third act kind of veers into Scott Pilgrim versus the World territory, and it's enjoyable for sure. Number 7 is Kneecap. This film is one of the most surprising of the festival, and I was so fortunate to be on the press line for this film and meet director Rich Pepiot and chat with all of the boys from Kneecap, DJ Pruva, Lokara, and Mowgli Bap. It was a wild ride on the press line, and this film is also a wild ride. Essentially, it follows the real-life rap group Kneecap, who rap primarily in Irish. This may not seem like a big deal, but being that they are from the north of Ireland, where Irish only received official language status a couple of years ago, every song, every concert is an implicit political statement. The film shows their rise, their use of drugs, their violence at times, and this one has been extremely controversial, particularly in Ireland, with some journalists and politicians actually calling for its ban. It was picked up by Sony Classic Pictures, so it should be coming to a theater near you this year. Definitely a wild ride worth watching on the big screen. Number 6 is a documentary called Ibelin, directed by Benjamin Ree, focusing on the real story of a Norwegian teen adult who unfortunately lost his life early to a degenerative genetic condition. This film is very interesting in both its premise and its form. Essentially, it follows the story of Mats, who did not have too many friends in person, but grew an enormous community of friends, of companions, of potential love interests online as a gamer. So it tracks his kind of story through real blog posts that he wrote, as well as real chat logs that they were able to pull, and visually a lot of these scenes are replicated using World of Warcraft imagery. So very unique and extremely emotional and heartwarming. Number 5 is Rob Peace. Rob Peace is the directorial feature debut from Chiwetel Ejiofor, who is well known as an actor for roles in such critically acclaimed films like 12 Years a Slave. This marks his first time sitting in that director's chair, and he performed admirably. This film follows the, again, real-life story of Rob Peace as he attends an Ivy League institution while simultaneously selling drugs in order to fund defense for his imprisoned father, who was charged with double homicide. The film is at its strongest when it explores that father-son relationship and also the dual identity of Rob Peace. Here we have a black man attending an Ivy League institution, kind of balancing between two worlds. One foot placed in his hometown, in his local community that he wants to build back up, and the other foot placed in an almost all-white institution. We see him explore this dynamic, and I had the opportunity to listen to Chiwetel Ejiofor speak in a conversation with Jesse Eisenberg, and he noted that every action that Rob Peace took was not necessarily an overt act of defiance, but rather it was just an instinct. There was never a place in which Rob was not authentically himself. So we have scenes, for example, of Rob choosing to wear a do-rag in a laboratory where no one had previously done that. No one had previously so clearly accepted who they are as a black man. There are innumerable twists and turns in this story, and it's one that will almost certainly kind of keep you on the edge of your seat. Number 4 is As We Speak. As We Speak is one of the most underrated films of the festival, directed by J.M. Harper, who previously has worked as an editor on a number of projects, including Genius, the Kanye West story that played on Netflix, and his skill and vision as an editor is certainly clear here. As We Speak is a documentary, but as you watch it, it feels as though you are watching a narrative feature. Harper is willing to kind of go against traditional expectations of documentary filmmakers and use a range of visual and narrative techniques that ultimately enhance the viewing experience. The film itself is kind of rooted in this book, Rap on Trial, which explores how rap lyrics have been weaponized and used against primarily black rappers in the criminal justice system, and what could be a documentary that relies heavily on talking head footage and very specific case studies, it chooses to go in another direction. It follows the, again, real-life rapper Kemba as he talks to real people. I also had the opportunity to chat with J.M. Harper, with Kemba, with some producers, as well as other rapper Rocky Fresh, and it was extremely enlightening. J.M. Harper, the second that you start speaking with him, you can see how brilliant he is, how thoughtful he is, and he said something about Kemba that I thought was quite fascinating. He said, Kemba is a James Baldwin. He's a translator. James Baldwin, being a black man during the height of the civil rights movement, was an academic and could speak to everyone. He could speak to the academic folks that at the time were primarily white, but he could also speak to black communities as well. And that's exactly what Kemba does here. He talks to a group of drill rappers, and then he talks to lawyers and professors. Beyond those conversations, though, there are a number of very interesting scenes, including a full reenactment of a scene from Romeo and Juliet, but using exclusively black rappers as the characters, again to highlight how in so many forms of art there has been violence throughout the years, but black rappers are being disproportionately punished for their use of violence in their lyrics, and unlike other artists, their words are being taken as almost exclusively autobiographical. Number 3 is exhibiting forgiveness. Another first-time feature debut, this time from painter Titus Defer. He is world-renowned as a painter. He's had his works displayed in art galleries and museums like the Museum of Modern Art and the Metropolitan. You can see his artistry here behind the camera, as well as he tells a semi-autobiographical story about essentially coming to terms with his father and trying to forgive someone who wasn't there when he needed him. The film stars Andre Holland playing, again, a very loose version of Titus himself. He plays a painter who is using his art as a way of turning trauma into something beautiful. The film explores themes of loneliness, themes of addiction and family, and it doesn't preach to you. It doesn't suggest that you must forgive those who have wronged you. It is simply an exploration of this pain and how we can best, as humans, move forward and create something out of it. Number 2 is Dee Dee. Dee Dee is yet another first feature film from this time director Sean Wang. Sean Wang is not a new filmmaker in general, however, as he actually has a short film nominated for an Academy Award this year. This film is also a semi-autobiographical story of a Taiwanese-American boy coming of age. The best way I can kind of characterize this film is a hybrid between Rice Boy Sleeps, a brilliant film last year from Korean-Canadian director Anthony Shim, and mid-90s. Both coming-of-age stories dealing with some cultural elements and also some awesome skate footage thrown in. Our protagonist is played by Isaac Wang, who is so good, far beyond his years. It's always tricky when you put so much weight on a young actor, but he performs brilliantly. The film itself is set in 2008, and I find it hard to think of any project that has so accurately represented coming of age in the 2000s. We have sequences of online chats, even with Smarter Child, kind of early AI for those who remember. We have Isaac Wing's character dropping F-bombs all the time in an act to be cool, an attempt to be cool, which I think a lot of us can relate to as well. We have him learning to flirt, trying to pretend that he's not nervous when he is. We see him hating his mother, but then ultimately recognizing everything that she's done for him. It is very emotional, it is engaging, and as overused as this term is, it is truly authentic. The #1 film of the 2024 Sundance Film Festival is A Real Pain. This is the second feature film from actor turned director Jesse Eisenberg, and it is undoubtedly his strongest work. It is based on real life experiences, again, that seems to be a common theme here. It follows two cousins, played by Jesse Eisenberg himself, alongside Kieran Culkin, as they go back to Poland to go on a Holocaust tour and visit the home of their grandmother. In Jesse Eisenberg's real life, this is based on his own aunt. And in fact, the very house that they visit in this film was the house in which his aunt lived. To be clear, this is not a Holocaust movie per se. This is a story about pain and the many forms that it can take. Yes, we have Poland as our backdrop. We have real locations that can send such an emotional impact and express so much about genocide and about the violence that has occurred, but that's not exclusively what this film is about. It's about individual pain, and it's about the differences in every individual in how we experience that pain and how we cope with that pain. Kieran Culkin puts forward what I hope will be recognized as one of the strongest performances of the year. I know that it's only January, but he is that good. Funnily enough, I was able to listen to Jesse Eisenberg chat about this film while in Park City, and he noted that Kieran Culkin wanted to drop out of the project a month before it started, and he actually only arrived in Poland the night before shooting, apparently not all that concerned with jet lag. And to add on to all of that, the morning of what was Kieran Culkin's most significant, longest, most impactful monologue, Kieran approached Jesse and he asked, "What scene are we shooting today?" Jesse, in a panic, said that he could grab him his script, what does he need? But then once he explained what the scene was, Kieran simply said, "Oh, I love that scene." And of course, he absolutely nailed it. Kieran Culkin plays a character who, at first glance, is the most hilarious, the most charismatic person in the room, but is simultaneously experiencing deep, meaningful pain. In slight contrast, Jesse Eisenberg's character is someone who has a stable job, who has a family and children, and seems, for the most part, to have everything together. In his strongest scene of the film, he speaks to his pain as unexceptional, almost as a reason for him not to share it or feel it. And What this film is essentially trying to show us is that all pain is valid. We have tremendous intergenerational pain from genocide, but we have personal pain that shows up in so many different ways. The film does not try too hard. It doesn't stuff itself with excessive monologues or voiceover. It sometimes simply lets the locations speak for themselves. In fact, Eisenberg spoke on this, saying that words could not express themes the same way that these images can. And in fact, the final image of this film is an absolute gut punch. It is subtle, but it is profound, and it beautifully captures the reality of human pain.